there were all of these universes, dimensions suspended in this space, and yet each one of them had an energetic filament that reached up and attached itself to this, what I'll call a spider web like matrix that was surrounding this golden sphere. And it was also pumping into each one of these filaments attached to these different dimensions the same love, the same welcome, the same knowledge that I was experiencing right there. It took another 8 months before I would be given the answer as to why I came back. She said, "Well, you started mumbling, and I couldn't understand anything you were saying. And then all of a sudden, you stopped, and you started shaking your head from side to side. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I don't believe it." And she said I told her the reason was sent back was to be a conduit of hope to those who don't have any or don't think there is. I'll start out by saying that at 11 o'clock on an early October morning in 2015, I became what I'll call an expert in dying, but I also became an expert in hope. Through basically no fault of my own, I was dead for over 6 minutes. I was lying on our local hospital's rehab fitness room floor. The questions I had later related to why did it happen at that specific place at that particular moment in time and not 1 hour earlier when I was out going to check on our 27 head of grazing beef cattle in our farm's pasture. It would take me a long time to understand that. But what happened that morning was really unusual. I, even the morning before, I could walk out amongst them and scratch them, pet them, and move around, and they would hardly pay me any attention. That morning, I didn't get 200 feet from them. They were all lying down on the grass. I didn't, and out in the middle of this 50-acre field. I didn't get 200 feet to them, and one of them jumped up and looked at me, perked her ears forward, and took off running across the field. And she went about 150, 200 feet, and she stopped and turned around and looked at me like she had seen a ghost. So, well, that caught the attention of the rest of the herd, and they jumped up and looked at me, and they took off running across the field. Now, as I said, that never happened before, and I was basically stunned when I saw this, but didn't really pick up on anything other than, well, this is really unusual behavior. So I turned and went back to our farmyard. And that morning, I had made a schedule to have the tires of our car changed at a service station in our local village, which is 12 miles from our farm. So I usually took my gym bag along because I thought if I ever have time, I'll just go to the hospital's fitness area and have a quick workout, which I had been doing for the previous 5 months. Parked my car, went downstairs, changed, came back up, and started to do some arm curls. Well, I finished my 20 and I got up, and the strangest thing happened. I looked at both of my forearms because they were tingling like they had fallen asleep. And that was the end of my time here. Because in the next moment, one moment I was looking at my arms, and the next moment I was sitting in what I can best describe is like a raft. I was floating. I was floating on this raft on these waves that were coming towards me, but they weren't water waves, they were energetic waves that were coming, and they were coming towards me. But the unusual thing was they were also going through me. And I didn't think a thing of it other than, oh, this is really interesting. And uh, it felt the area I was in was a dimension that was so welcoming. It was so filled with love, and that's what I was getting from these waves. It was all of this knowledge. Uh, at that point, I realized I understood everything. I didn't even think twice about it or remember thinking twice about it. So as I was looking at these waves coming in, I looked up, and what I can describe is seeing this gigantic, and that's a small word for what it appeared to be, uh, golden, yellow, pulsing energy form that filled up this whole space in front of me. And it was like if you packed 10 million suns together and it glowed that brightly, but yet it wasn't something that burnt me up. I could actually reach out and touch it because it seemed like it wanted me to join with it, merge with it. At that point, I was looking at the surface, and what I saw were these little sparkles all over the surface, shooting out in every direction that you can imagine it going. It would be like having a sparkler, for a celebration. It was that kind of a sparkle that was coming out, and they were shooting off all over the place. So I turned to look to see what else was there, where they were going, and what I saw was what I'll say was an infinite multitude of dimensions and universes suspended out in this eternal space. The best way that I found to be able to describe it to anyone is that if you take our universe, everything we know about it, the breadth, depth, the size of it, uh, planets, universes, stars, and compress it down to like a single sheet of paper, and then you suspend it over here in this eternal space, and then you do it with another one, and you do it right next to it, and then another one and another one, and go for an infinite direction in one way, as we understand directions, vertical, horizontal, crosswise, whatever. There were all of these universes, dimensions suspended in this space, and yet each one of them had an energetic filament that reached up and attached itself to this, what I'll call a spider web like matrix that was surrounding this golden sphere, and it was also pumping into each one of these filaments attached to these different dimensions the same love, the same welcome, the same knowledge that I was experiencing right there. And it was at this point, I remember turning to see what was behind me as we understand front and back here, just to see. Because it'd be like going on a trip and forgetting to take a look down the side roads. Well, when I turned around, what I saw was what I can best describe as infinity. And that was because the emulsion of eternity acted like a magnifying glass so that the farther I looked into it, the clearer it became. And I realized I was looking at this through different set, a different lens, a different set of eyes than I possibly could here with a low wattage of my human eye. Well, I turned back around, and all of this time seemed like if I were going to put age on it. It was like centuries. But yet later I found out that during this time there were a dozen EMTs, hospital staff, back at the hospital's rehab room, frantically working on my body, trying to restart my heart. And eventually, in one moment, I was there in this wonderful universe. Had I known it then, I would have told them probably, don't bother. I mean, I like where I was. I didn't have a second thought about not wanting to stay there. So one moment I'm still on this energetic raft, and then in less than a blink of an eye, I was gone, and I returned to my body. And later I understood that's when they must have started restarted my heart. So I had to leave and come back here. So I took the longest trip I had ever taken in 6 minutes. And I came back after witnessing an experience that would take me a very long time to understand and even longer to be able to explain to anyone. And yet, it would be another 8 months before I would fully understand why it happened. Uh, and that was a reason for my exploration. But it would be another 8 months before I finally was given the answer as to why I returned. To be and subsequently to be able to talk with you today, Lauren.
That's an incredible experience. Thank you so much for sharing that with me. Before we get into the 8 months later and discovering that, I do have some more questions. I think my first question would be, were you kind of a spiritual guy before this happened, or was this totally unexpected to happen to you?
I would I would characterize myself as more spiritual than religious. I mean, I was brought up in the United Methodist tradition. I had a Germanic Methodist background in our rural area. Um, but I had always wondered what it would be like to leave your body and go to a different dimension and be able to come back. Well, that was when I was younger. I didn't realize that I would actually get the chance to do that. And so it was kind of like a deja vu sort of thing, like, well, be careful what you wish for. But but having said that, um, I wouldn't. Sometimes I would wish this for other people to experience, but I wouldn't want them to purposely do that so they could experience because you might not come back.
Right.
And so um, but it it did the whole experience in what I witnessed uh, has taught me a lot.
That's amazing. When you were looking at the bright pulsing light, do you think that was God?
There's no doubt in my mind. I've used the term divine creator, the source of all creation, the nest of creation, the God essence. Pick whatever word you want for something that is all knowledge, all love, all creation, all creator, uh, which was which is a hard concept for us to really grasp until you experience it. So yes, I do think that was the God essence. And as I've thought about this over the years, and as I was working through uh, my writing to understand it, I realized that the little sparks that I saw were real. They were not, something that fired off in my brain while I was laying down on the floor. They were very real, and I understood them to be that's where each one of us was born. That is the portion of us that is inside us, our spirit, our soul, our God essence that we carry with us. And I realized that we are all carrying the DNA of this God essence, this source of all creation. And we come here with it. And that when we will leave here, that will still go on.
I love that. That's beautiful to think about. You mentioned that time was obviously different. You said something interesting, like I believe it was what we consider behind us here. Was direction and movement even different in that realm?
Well, first of all, there was no sense of time. There was no sense of space. There was no sense of movement other than watching this unfolding with what was in front of me because this was a pulsing uh, dynamic that I was looking at, the God essence. You know, people think that people tend to want to make the God essence a personage and they want to assign a gender to it. Well, it's none of that. As from my experience, now others may have a different experience of it, and that's fine. But mine was not where it differentiated between uh, human and non-human, or between gender, or between pick anything that we use to separate ourselves out from other people. No
Hmm.
nationalities, no anything else. So this was a um, one size fits all essence because that's where we all came from, and that's what I believe because having experienced it, how can I not believe that? Is would be the question I would ask myself because I've never doubted my experience. Um, Other people may not believe it, and that's their choice. But all I can say is, once you leave here, you're going to find out that that's really the truth. Now, that leads into I don't believe everyone who leaves this life has the same experience as to what they're going to experience. That's why I don't think that all NDE stories are the same because each one of us here is unique. And so, why wouldn't we have a unique experience? Um, I think there are a lot of common threads that run through the stories, and uh, well, why wouldn't there be variation? Would be my question to someone else.
That's interesting. But definitely, yeah, people wonder that. And I think often, like, out of good intention, because they're curious why it's different for people. But that makes sense. Like, we're all unique. It's kind of the perfect experience for each person. Do you think that might be right?
Mm,
Mm-hmm.
mm, I do. I do. I believe that's what happens. Now, I can't quantify that, but I can tell from my experience why was I given this when maybe someone else wasn't. Well, I think it comes back to we are all given what. Let me just back a little bit. When I understood that these little sparks coming out were us, they were me, they were you, they were any one of your listeners. At some point, we were created and we came from this God essence. And that's why I say we all each carry the DNA of that God essence. And we come to this uh, dimension, this lower energetic dimension, to experience this life. Uh, I've used an example where, and we choose to come. Whether or not we're allowed to come is something I can't answer, but we choose to come here. I know that. because in 1951, I chose to come to this lower dimension. And I was born with my parents, I was raised by them, and now I spent roughly 73 years experience the physics, the dynamics of this universe, which I think is probably multiplied in other different universes, but we may never know. So I come here to learn, and in a way that we have the what we refer to as the five senses, the tactile and the intellectual. And when we leave here, I will take everything I leave here, learned here, with me when I go back. I'll get back onto what I call an energetic superhighway, and I'm going to go on to another experience because we are not destroyed. We are able to continue our journey because that's what we do. Why would the God essence destroy part of itself? That makes absolutely no sense to me, even here in this dimension. And it certainly didn't there because everything is energetic life. And so I do know that for me, I do know that we are going to experience something else once we leave here, which is my offer of hope to people in that this is not the end of it. Well, I mean, sure, our bodies aren't made to last forever. Not in this lower density dimension that we're in. Uh, and eventually, it will use up its fuel, and then it will cease to function. And then what happens? Well, I think our spirit, our soul, whatever you want to call it, the God essence within us, just leaves and goes on to another experience, which was one of the things that I did learn from my experience was that our bodies are more than the sum of its parts. When I was standing next to the arm curl machine, I had the same body parts as when I was lying dead on the floor: two arms, two hands, two legs, and two eyes. Uh, but what happened, what was different between standing there and lying on the floor is that that little part of me, the soul essence, had left. And then when they did restart my heart finally, it had to come back. But there were other reasons that it came back, which took me a long time to understand.
So, yeah, let's get into that. What was your journey then when you did come back and that journey to understand why you went into that dimension?
Well, first of all, I used the term I had interdimensional confusion after I came back. I was not aware of my surroundings for 8 hours, and this happened at about 11 o'clock in the morning, and it wasn't until 8:30, 9 o'clock at night in the hospital. I didn't know why I was in the hospital. Uh, that I finally was able to basically be coherent enough to realize that I'm back here. My first thought was, oh crap. If it really didn't feel as good as where I was.
Of course.
I remember that feeling specifically uh, when when came to, basically. So it took me, well, first of all, there was absolutely no damage to my heart.
Okay.
Even with the multiple chest compressions and the three electrical shocks that I got, nothing. They couldn't find a thing wrong with it other than I had two blockages, which apparently kicked my heart out of rhythm, and that's why I collapsed. Um, but I was there where there was help anyway. Um, so everyone who came to see me, my wife, our son and our daughter, and our daughter's fiance, came to visit me. And I had no idea why they were there because the last I knew, I was doing some arm curls with nobody else around. The next thing I know, here I am laying flat on my back with my family around me, looking like I had died or something. And they said, "Well, you did." I said, "That's not true. You wouldn't believe where I was." Anyway, so um, it took a while to physically heal from that. And there's a big chunk of that in the story I tell in my book, but it took another, like I said, 8 months before I would be given the answer as to why I came back. And it happened during the middle of the night. I was struggling because they put me on some medication that was really making me tired because it dropped my blood pressure very low. And I came down for breakfast one morning, and my wife Mary was at the other end of the kitchen table, and I noticed she had a notepad in her hand, and I thought, oh boy, I'm going to get it now. I did something wrong
Oh no.
somewhere. And I sat down, and she waited me to get comfortable. And then she said, well, do you want to hear what you said last night? And I said, boy, I didn't say anything. She said, oh, yeah, you did. Okay, what did I say this time? And she said, well, you sat up in bed, and I had a notepad next to me, so I thought I'd write down if you said anything. And she said, well, you started mumbling, and I couldn't understand anything you were saying. And then all of a sudden you stopped, and you started shaking your head from side to side. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. That's what she said I was saying. And then she asked me, what don't you believe? And I told her, I don't believe the reason I came back. And she said, well, what was that reason? And she said, I told her the reason was sent back was to be a conduit of hope to those who don't have any or don't think there is. And then there was this pause after she got done. And I said, well, what else? She shrugged her shoulders. Nothing. You lay back down and went to sleep again. So I'm grateful to Mary for having written it down because the moment she explained that, I understood exactly why I was at the fitness room with that much help available and the ambulance service just right across the street. And not an hour before, when I was out in the pasture on our farm where nobody would have found me for 8 hours. So having that answer not only put me at ease, but it told me that everything I experienced was true. And in the end, that's the one I'm the one that I have to be comfortable with it, that it all is true. But there's a little bit more to that, but we can go into that a little later.
Absolutely. Do you remember this, I don't know, dream mesh message at all, or it was just a complete surprise when Mary told you about this the next day?
It was it was a complete surprise to me.
Okay.
No, I don't remember sitting up in the bed. Uh, Maybe somewhere down the road I will, but no, it was not something in my memory bank. But one of the things I did learn from my experience is that being confronted, or not confronted, being involved or immersed in all of this infinite knowledge, that I couldn't bring it all back. I liken it to a computer that maybe has, say, 5 gigabytes of memory, as an example. And all of a sudden, I'm confronted with 200 trillion terabytes. You know, how do you bring all of that information back without basically frying your brain here? Because it just
Mhm.
wouldn't compute. So I think there is more in my experience in that other dimension that I haven't realized yet or haven't still located in my memory bank. But because I was able to witness what I did and bring it back into this dimension, there's no doubt that we can time travel, we can uh, transfer information from one dimension to another. Because if that wasn't true, how could I remember that? And quite frankly, I've been asked that. How do you know that you weren't dreaming? I spoke to the hospital's nurses group, the ER nurses. That was about 4 months later, and one of the nurses asked me that. Well, could you have been dreaming? Oh, yeah, that's possible. But we all have dreams. I mean, you have dreams, I have dreams. I assume everyone has dreams. And you wake up in the morning and you think, hmm, I remember a little bit of that, or maybe I remember a person, or maybe I remember something that happened, but you don't remember the whole thing because dreams have a way of dissolving, uh, dispersing in the ethers that we embody. But yet, not one thing from my experience, and it's been almost 10 years now. Not one thing from my beginning of my experience there to the end has changed. It's always as vivid now as when I experienced it first. And the interesting thing is when I was there, there were what we would attach as human emotions. For me, it was the warmth and the welcome and the acceptance. And it created like a bubble, not a bubble, but a sense of warmth, energetic heat. And every time I remember it here, I get that same feeling. So I don't know how else to explain it. And again, people can believe it or not believe it, but for me, it's very comforting because when I stop to think about that whole experience, it's just like it all wells back up in me, and I feel really, really good.
Oh, that's amazing. I mean, how lucky almost to be able to experience that whenever you need to.
You're right about that. I'm fortunate. I like I said earlier, I wouldn't suggest somebody have an NDE to be able to experience it, but I'm grateful for it. But I'm not given a free pass. I still have to function in this dimension with the physics and everything involved. I mean, I still have to pay my bills. I still have to eat. I still have to try to control my anger at things that are injustice that I see. Uh, I still have to function and drive on the same time, right, same side of the road as everybody else. Just because I had this wonderful experience doesn't make me more special than anyone else. I've just had an extraordinary experience and I'm fortunate, and I've wanted to share because that's what I was told I needed to do.
Amazing. I want to ask, what would you tell people who fear death?
That's an interesting question. I can explain why I don't. So, what I would suggest to those who are in that dilemma of well, I don't want to die. Well, I don't think most people want to die because they're not aware of what exists beyond us. It's human nature to want to keep experiencing this, but it's energetic nature to want to experience and go back to that other eternal dimension that I was in, where there is no time and space. You just are. You just be. No questions asked. Uh, if I could leave something for people to think about, and I'm not going to tell them what to think, I just want them to consider why would a God essence want to punish you? Why would a God essence want to send you to a dark space that it has never created, such as, I'll use the term hell? Why would you not want, or why would you not be accepted once you left here, even if you're not accepted by people around us? Because again, we each carry that DNA of the Creator, and it's not going to get destroyed. It's a hard leap to make for people who have not experienced it or have doubts or just don't believe that there is something else. But there is. Why would I come back and say this if it hadn't happened? Um, and one of the things I was very cautious about in writing about my experience is to make sure that what I experienced was true. And um, and I know that because I was told that, and I was told that by what I'll refer to as guides. Some people may call them angels. For me, I've met my guides twice. Not in No, I'm not talking about a body. I'm talking about an energetic form which transmits and transfers information instantaneously. And basically, I asked, okay, I need to know if this story is true or if I am indeed uh, making it up or dreaming it. And the answer I got was that yes, it was true for me, but not that everyone is going to have the same experience that you had. But for you, yes, this was true. I needed to understand that and know that because, first of all, I didn't want to be deceived. I hate being deceived. And I did not want to deceive myself into believing something that's not true. And I certainly did not want to deceive someone else with a false narrative if I was going to write about it. So when I was given the answer that yes, it was true, yeah, that's good enough for me.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing your story, Philip. I think the last question I want to ask is how can people hear more from you?
I'm not a very good salesman, but I have written a book. It's called 6 Minutes in Eternity, and it's available at Amazon for those who don't really want to deal with Amazon. I have copies. They can find me at uh, philiphosseterbooks.com, and if they have a question, they can write to me there. And I certainly would, take the time to answer it. I mean, a legitimate question. Um, and I'm also on Facebook at phosseter.com. So those are the ways anyone is free to contact me if they wish.
Perfect. Before we wrap up, is there anything else you would like to share?
There is something I would like to share, and that is that um, love and recognizing and accepting the divinity in every person we meet, every person we probably will never meet, is the reason for our journey here. And hope is the pathway for us to walk.